What's up, BookTube? My name's Matt at the Nocturnal Matt on Instagram, and welcome to my channel where we discuss all things horror from the real to the unreal. Today I'm going to be diving into my review of Stephen King's The Gunslinger and telling you what I thought of the first book in what is his 7-book magnum opus, The Dark Tower. So I'm reading The Gunslinger as part of the Instagram read-along All Things Save the Beam in 2019, which I recommend you join if you haven't already, because we're a good community, although I am quite a way behind. Like, I'm still reading the second book of the series because time is a thing that happens. Ultimately, I thought I'd start off by telling you what I liked about the book, and then we'll get to what I didn't like about the book later. What I liked about the book was its characters and the world. I liked how Stephen King focuses on the characters as opposed to the world, like most fantasy books do. Most fantasy books like Game of Thrones, Lord of the Rings, they seem quite concerned with us learning all about the world around the characters. They seem quite focused on us finding out more about what the wider world of the characters inhabit of Westeros, or whatever the world is, and the details, the fine details, the politics of that world. Whereas Stephen King isn't interested in any of that. He's more focused on Roland and what the world around him is to Roland, and all we learn about the world of the Dark Tower is learned through Roland's perspective. And I really like that, because what that does is endears us to the character of Roland. It endears us to what his experiences are and his experience of the Dark Tower and of the world around him. And I really like that. I keep wanting to say Midgard, but I know that's like Thor. But it's just in my head. But what I really liked about the world around Roland, and like I say about his perspective, is how it sort of puts this emphasis on stories and the stories that we tell each other. And I really found that like quite fascinating, because there's kind of what I call like a Russian doll effect to the narrative, where you've got the surface narrative, the present day narrative, and then Roland will start telling a story, and the book will jump into the story, and then someone within that story will start telling a story, and then the book will jump into that story. And there are these sort of nested narratives that go quite deep, narrativeception, if you will. But I really like that, because it gives you a sense of importance to this sort of kind of classical medieval sense of oral storytelling. And we learn a lot about, for example, the Tull section of the book is told as a story by Roland to another character. And that character acts as a sort of proxy for us as the reader as well. And what happens in Tull really establishes Roland as a character. And to be honest, that kind of, for me, Tull is the sort of crux of the book. As much as when we meet Jake later on in the book, that's important to the ongoing narrative and obviously the conclusion, which I won't be spoiling in this video. But for me, Tull is sort of the crux of the novel, because it's where we really learn what Roland is, and the fact that he's willing to make snap decisions. And perhaps we also learn what is my favourite part of the book, which is the Man in Black. We learn about him and what he wants to do to the world. And to be quite honest with you, I'm still not sure about his motives. What I like about books like the Gunslinger is the antagonist kind of differs to a lot of Stephen King antagonists. Where in books like It, for example, and The Shining, we know the antagonist's motives. We know Pennywise's motives just to eat a bunch of kids. I know I'm oversimplifying it, but like his motives in It is generally just to eat a bunch of children and make them more afraid, because, you know, tasty, tasty fear and whatnot. But what I really liked about the Man in Black in The Gunslinger is that we don't really know why he's doing what he's doing. And even if we do learn more about his motives, he still does everything with a bit of a smile. He still really enjoys messing with people, and that's scary, man. That's really creepy. That's what's scary about someone like the Joker, in particular the Heath Ledger Joker, is that he's a maniac. You know, he's not Mark Hamill's Joker and Jack Nicholson's Joker, they've got a psychosis in there. I'd love to, I don't really know the proper terminology, but they're definite sociopaths. But then also there's a sense of methodology to them. There's a motive to them. Whereas Heath Ledger's Joker is quite famously lacking a real clear motive, and a lot of what he does is just to inflict chaos upon the world. Obviously, you've got Alfred's famous line, "Some men want to watch the world burn." But in The Gunslinger, his character, the character of the Man in Black, is very much lacking in that motive. He's lacking in that sense of definitive sort of ideology at least at this stage in the series. And that means a lot of what he does, like he does something quite terrifying when he gets to Tull, which is he leaves this trap for Roland that is more of a moral trap than it is a literal physical trap, because it asks Roland to do things that call into question the validity of his whole quest. And that for me is a good antagonist. That for me, an antagonist that really makes the protagonist question his own goal, especially when his goal is to destroy the antagonist, which is essentially what the book of the Gunslinger is about, is really interesting. I mean, the brilliance of this book, and we'll get on to what I didn't really like in a minute, but the brilliance of this book is the simplicity, really. Where most fantasy novels are sort of expansive and verbose, this is quite a sort of singular, quite not condensed, but quite simple story. And I loved that about it. I love that you can sum up the book's story within the first sort of line. It's in my opinion, one of the best opening lines in all of literature. The Man in Black fled across the desert and the Gunslinger followed. And that is essentially, in a nutshell, what the story of the Gunslinger is about. And I really like that. What I didn't like about the book was the lack of plot. At times I found it very sort of difficult to read on, because even though he doesn't sort of languish on description, he still doesn't have a great deal of plot in there. And while that might be great in some books, and in some books it does work, in this book I didn't think it did at work a lot of the time, because some of the connective tissue between the big things happening, between him meeting Jake, between him going to Tull, between him having a meeting with the Man in Black, and a lot of the connective tissue just felt a little bit drab and boring. Which is unusual for Stephen King, because usually the connective tissue is the best parts of the book. But I mean, even that stuff, I say drab and boring, like it was still interesting and it still added something. I'm still not fully invested in the backstory of Roland. A lot of the stuff from the past just I didn't find fully engaging. I like Jake, but I want him to do more in the story. I want more from him as a character. But overall, I really enjoyed the novel, and I'm about halfway through the drawing of the three, and again, really enjoying it. I'm listening to the audiobooks for those wondering. I did actually dip into the print book of The Gunslinger when I wanted to sort of have a bit of silence, but for the most part, I listen to the audiobooks for these books, because I feel like I want to experience that oral storytelling more than anything. But overall, really enjoyed the book. I'd love to know what you thought of The Gunslinger if you've already read it. If you're a member of the All Things Save the Beam read along on Instagram, let me know in the comments below. And also, I would like to know what you liked and didn't like about this video. I would like to know if you think I'm doing anything particularly badly, whether or not I'm perhaps a little bit too low down because I'm currently sat on a box in order to not chop the top of my head off. Or maybe if there are any other videos that you'd like to see in the future. I am going to be doing a big trip out to New England in the summer, so expect to see a bunch of videos from that. I'm going to be visiting a bunch of great literary locations from Providence to Bangor in Maine. So stay tuned for some great videos from that trip. Also, make sure to check out the full written review of The Gunslinger, which you can find down below. So thank you very much for watching, and remember, keep reading.